First of all, many thanks for the kind invitation. What I would like to do indeed is in the next 5 to 10 minutes or so, share a bit my experience as an ERC applicant and as an ERC grantee. With, of course, this disclaimer. I am a lawyer, so I start with a disclaimer. I think every person's trajectory is unique, and everyone, and that's the beauty of the ERC process, has a shot at obtaining such a grant. So whatever I tell you about myself and about my experience with the process is just one element of sharing or of an experience that should not necessarily be yours, but that hopefully helps you a bit in framing the issues. So just very briefly about me. I am a lawyer, as was said in the introduction. I did my legal studies at KU Leuven, followed by 1 year of postgraduate studies in the United States. It's at that time that I decided to pursue a scientific academic career, and I applied for the FWO Vlaanderen as an aspirant in 2010. I got that, returned to Leuven, wrote my PhD, did a lot of other things, and then moved on to Leiden University for a few years as an universitair docent before returning to Belgium in January 2016, where I have been since at the Université de Liège. The ERC process and thinking about ERC in my mind started when I was at Leiden University in my first postdoctoral appointment as an universitair docent. Because of the granting submission culture there, I started thinking, well, maybe this might be something for me to do at some point. But as always, other projects, other responsibilities have intervened, and for quite some years, I did not focus primarily on submitting an ERC grant. Having said that, I was always thinking about what idea could be potentially relevant for an ERC project. So even though I only applied relatively late in the time frame for starting grantees, well, relatively late at the last shot I had been thinking about what idea would I want to develop from the very first moment I was entering the postdoctoral stage. Now, I only had the opportunity, or I only felt ready to submit an ERC grant application once I already obtained, and that's specific to my situation, a tenured academic position as a member of the Corps Académique at a Belgian university. So that gave me some peace of mind on the one hand, but also gave me the opportunity to think, what do I want to do now as a scientist, as a researcher with my career? And it's at that point in time, despite some of my colleagues effectively saying, why would you still apply for an ERC? You have a tenured academic position. I really wanted to give it a try, to give it a shot. First of all, because or out of scientific curiosity, I had a feeling that some questions were not sufficiently addressed in my own field, and would perhaps need or could perhaps benefit from a more ambitious, let's say, high risk, high gain project to address them. And I also wanted to, on a personal level, establish a larger research group with people working on the same topics, on the same interests, which motivated me to indeed try out the ERC call and to establish my research group, or to expand my research group in that direction. The difficulty, of course, and it has been stated, I think, in the overall presentation by the agency as well, is finding your idea. And I really have been given that idea some thought, also in terms of legal studies, in terms of law. How can you stand out? What relevant, but also above all groundbreaking idea can be worth funding? And it took me quite some years to think about this, and I had narrowed down the ideas I wanted to explore to two by 2019, so almost 6 years after I defended my PhD. One idea was really a topic on which I hadn't published anything, but had been interested in for a long time. And another topic was more in line with what I did as a doctoral researcher, as a postdoctoral researcher, but that would be novel because it would introduce a new methodology, a new methodological framework, a new approach to studying the practice of legal rules and the interaction, in my case, between the European Union and the national member state administrations. For a long time, up until April 2019, when I wanted to apply in October 2019, my idea was to develop a project on the completely new topic. But then, for some reason, I got cold feet, perhaps, but I changed my mind and went back to the terrain I was more familiar with, but also had a better understanding of what the open questions were, the questions that needed addressing, which is why I chose the second team more in line with what I did, but with a new method, a new approach to study questions of law. When I started out working in that direction, one of the first things I did was trying to get to know my panel. And get to know your panel doesn't mean harassing people and finding out who was on the panel, but have a look at the lists from previous panels to see the diversity of disciplines that are represented in your panel. In my case, the SH2 panel. What I noticed there was immediately there are some lawyers on the panel, but the array of social scientists that are represented there goes way beyond law. And that's something very important to keep in mind and to distinguish project writing in terms of ERC from other types of projects. The evaluators of your project will not necessarily be experts in your discipline. So that invites you to write in a very pedagogical way and to really sell your idea from the ground upwards. And having a look at who had been panel members in previous years helped me already to focus the way in which I would write my proposal. I decided on the idea, and I also needed some time away from everything, both from the university, but also away from home, be really occupied by writing the proposal. Again, that's another personal element. I needed that solitude at some point in time, which is why for 1 month I moved to a small university in the United Kingdom, the University of Bournemouth, to actually only focus on writing that proposal for 3.5 weeks time. I did that and I managed to have a first draft ready of both the B1 and the B2 at that point in time. Now then I had the proposal or I sent the proposal to a select group of people because my style of working, I like to write on my own and to improve the project on my own, to be self-critical all the time, to draft, redraft, but some external feedback is always welcome, is always necessary, especially from people who have been familiar with the process in the past. So after that month of writing, I spent not the entire summer, but part of my summer redrafting over and over again the B1 and B2 parts. And in the end, I think I have written 4 to 5 drafts of each B1 and B2 part and have been fine-tuning them until the very end, very close to the deadline. I did have, even at the final stages, some doubts because the first work package of my proposal was relatively low risk. The risk was in the relevance and the use of the new method, the new approach to familiar themes. So the second and third work packages in my project were way more high risk. And I was doubting, can I really start out a research project that has a first rather incremental work package that builds upon what I did in the past, that uses the classical methods of study we use as lawyers in our field. In the end, I decided to keep that element because I thought it was a necessary intermediary step towards going to the more high risk elements. And I'm very glad I did that, but I have to admit, I was in doubt about using or sticking with that first work package until the October 2019 deadline. Then the submission time comes, and of course, I cannot stress enough, it is very important to organize yourself and to really make time for the proposal, even in the final stages, even when you have teaching or other research or other admin responsibilities. It is fundamental, it is crucial to devote some time and to organize your other tasks to really have the opportunity to finalize the project in the best circumstances. And then indeed, I submitted my project, and with little expectations, because it was the first time I applied. It was the last time I could apply for a starting grant, but I thought, well, at least I will obtain good feedback on the relevance of my research, on the relevance of this new approach, and I could use that, I could integrate that in a potential consolidator grant application in the upcoming years. Now, in my case, that hasn't been necessary, because in April I got the news that my B1 part was reviewed favorably, and then I moved on to the second round, which was a huge relief, because writing a B1 is like writing a self-promotional document. You basically promote not yourself, but also your project, and you try to flag, to point out why you are the one needing to conduct this type of research now. And that's really the background bottom line you have to take into consideration. Why am I the person capable of doing this type of research, and why at this stage of my career I can do this? So I was very happy that I managed apparently to convince the panel of this. But then, of course, the next step would have been the B2 evaluation, where your project is really thoroughly evaluated by a number of external reviewers as well. Back in the back of my mind and in the back of my agenda, I had started to prepare a bit for the interview. But in my call, the specificity, of course, was that we were confronted with the COVID-19 pandemic in the spring of 2020, reason for which, for the starting grant application, no interviews had been organized for that specific call. So I unfortunately cannot share my experience with the interview with you, because I didn't have an interview, which generated additional stress, which is also something I would encourage you not to do too much. If you don't have to, don't look back on your proposal until you get feedback, because if you start rereading it, you start thinking, oh, I should have said this differently, I should have modified this. I started to do that, unfortunately, because there would have been no interview. I would recommend no one to do that. So I had to wait until the final judgment, if you want, came out. And that came out in my case in July 2020. Pour la petite histoire, I was en route towards my holiday destination. So at a parking lot next to a French highway, I was confronted with an email from the ERC, then an email from my dean, an email from my university. So I had the impression that something indeed was happening. So that was very good news. But then, of course, a next step starts. You have to start thinking, how can I implement this project? Do I need to make some slight modifications to my budget and to my work plan that I had proposed? And do I want to conduct this project at the host institution I had envisaged? That's another question, and a very relevant question that emerges, because once you get the ERC project, you are there with a significant budget, and other universities are obviously also, or potentially also, interested in welcoming you on their premises. So from at that point in time, once you get the project, you a lot of questions, a lot of organization comes up. But then again, nothing beats the feeling of having obtained the project, and everything, negotiation, admin, etc., you happily accept it, of course. But it takes some time as well to get organized, especially when, as I had a full-time teaching load. It also requires organization with the host institution, in my case, still my own university at Liège, to get things organized. So that takes time, but you can ask for a delay for the start of your project, which I did. My project only started a good month ago, so relatively late. Normally you don't, normally it's not customary to wait this long, but I managed to in my specific case, to obtain that extension. Afterwards, you get, of course, the comments from the reviewers. That's very useful. And from that, I can make up some elements that have played a role in the evaluation of my project. First of all, the importance of publications, international mobility, not necessarily publications only in A1 or top-ranked journals, but a variety of publications that show that you can conduct independent research. That has been, I think, the most important one, but also in my case, my academic network. I had a feeling from the comments of some reviewers that they were familiar to some extent already before I submitted the grant with my work. So that helped as well. But in the end, I think a good dose of luck is always part of the process, which is why I think if you believe you have a shot and you have a chance, I would encourage you wholeheartedly to apply. And I think I will stop